People move for all sorts of reasons. And if you take interesting times like after the Second World War, I remember in London, lots of people who I knew, their parents lived in flats above shops. And it was a great move towards three-bedroom suburbia. And I think the same thing happened in Leeds. People who are living in poor houses in Chapeltown realised that the goal was to live somewhere from the Falklands going north, in Moortown, in a house, in some form of semi or detached house, but to be a homeowner. That was a middle-class aim, and that was the thing people were aspiring towards.
By the time of the 50s and 60s, the tailoring industry had started to go into decline, and Jews therefore had to do other jobs, and they moved into other areas.
Others went to different things. They had different ideas. They became doctors, dentists, pharmacists, anything but the clothing business, because for a lot of people the clothing business was a pain.
The majority of the Jewish community now are more professional rather than manufacturing. You've got Jewish doctors and lawyers and accountants, which is usually the next generation from the manufacturing families.
The next generation were quite entrepreneurial, and it wasn't only confined to the Ziff family. I mean, one of the largest retail concerns of the lot was two that I can think of immediately started their life in this part of the world: the Burton Group and Marks and Spencers.
If you look at the Marks and Spencer family and what happened to them, because they became one of the biggest success stories of immigration this country's ever seen. A penniless peddler. That's what Michael Marks was. He came over without any money, and he simply took his handcart around the streets selling bits of cloth, and eventually, 150 years later, Marks and Spencer is now one of the best known British businesses or industries in the world.
Well, it's in the Jewish mind. He has to do this sort of thing. And it didn't take long before they joined or got elected to the city council, even becoming the Lord Mayor on, I think, 3 occasions.
The fact that we've now got MPs and people in the cabinet and all that kind of thing shows how we've progressed with a realisation that we've got to take part in the wider community as well as being so insular.
So you had someone like Arnold Ziff, who opened the Merrion Centre, which was the first shopping centre, or big shopping centre in Europe, in Leeds in the 1960s. And you had people like Manny Cousins, who then went to one of the most successful football clubs in Europe at the time, Leeds United.
The Jewish community always had a reputation for being charitable and philanthropic. They also had a reputation for being hard businessmen. They also had a reputation for being involved in sporting things.
You see, what could a Jew talk to his non-Jewish workmate about? Religion? No, that was taboo. Entertainment? What was there in entertainment? But it did have a common denominator, and that was sport. It allowed him to communicate and converse.
Leeds United are formed in the early 1920s because Leeds City was kicked out of the league overnight. The meeting for it to take place takes place in a Jewish solicitor's office, a guy called Alf Masser. He holds the meeting that gets the new Leeds United formed.
Because Leeds United became a force in Europe and the world, and in a board of 6 people, 3 of them were Jews and the other 3 non-Jews, that was unheard of. It set a precedent in which today you can see a lot of Jewish people involved in football clubs.
I think that Leeds United also played a role in enabling the Jewish community to be fully integrated into the wider community. Leeds Jewish boys, although they should have gone to shul on a Saturday morning, but usually preferred going to a football match on a Saturday afternoon.
Nearly all games were on a Saturday afternoon. Unfortunately, I sometimes used to tell a lie to my bubba that she actually thought I was going to a shiva on a Shabbos afternoon, and one particular Shabbos shuvah, I went to see Manchester United and Bolton Wanderers, and returned back to the household at approximately 7 o'clock. And of course, as I told you earlier on in our conversation, all my aunties and uncles tended to go there on a Saturday, on a Shabbos afternoon. And one of my uncles said, "Was it a good game?" And my bubba looked at me in astoundment, and of course she wasn't very, very happy when she found out that I'd been going to football matches on a Shabbos afternoon. But that's not the first time I got caught out, and probably not the last.
So Jews were now entering mainstream society, becoming successful, making an impact, and most importantly of all, they felt that they were being accepted by mainstream society.
Leeds is now noted for being one of the declining communities in Anglo Jewry. And it's a very, very sad fact. To me personally, because I've been brought up in Leeds and seen how things were 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have dreamt that the decline would have been so rapid. This is what's come as a shock to me. The decline in Jewish practice and the Jewish way of life in Leeds has become so rapid.
In the 1960s, I think there was somewhere between 25,000 Jews in Leeds. Now, I'm not 100% sure of my facts. I think it's down to about 7,000.
Many of the younger people felt the grass was greener in places like Manchester and London, so off they went. People died, of course, and there was no immigration into Leeds, really.
I always think of a friend of mine who was a fishmonger in Leeds Market, whose business was founded by his grandparents, and his mother, who recently passed away at the age of 94, would always say to him when he came home, "What's trade like today?" So he's very quiet. Well, he should be busy because it's the Jewish Passover. And the Jews, in my day, they used to buy 14 pounds of haddock, 7 pounds of cod, 6 pounds of halibut and 3 pounds of salmon. He says, "Yes, mother, but the Jewish people today don't have families with 12 children. And that's the difference. We don't have the large families."
Integrated is an interesting word. Assimilate is an interesting word. Integrated because the Jews learnt English quickly. They wanted to get on. They wanted to be in business. All those things that help them progress in society, they did comparatively quickly. Assimilated, if you mean marrying out, not being part, people disappearing from the community. It happened all the time, but it happens at a greater rate as we get nearer the present.
Because there's always a price to pay for integrating into another society. And quite clearly that price is a loss of identity.
Religion isn't as fashionable as it was. As simple as that.
When you don't have Jewish shops, when you don't have Jewish schools, when you don't have Jewish places of interest, you don't have a community.
There isn't a community. They disappeared. And it's disappearing fast, unfortunately. Basically, they've gone right down now. There used to be quite a lot of people living here. Now down to, 6,000? How many? Yeah, there used to be 30,000, 40,000 living here. So what's the answer? Don't know. What will be the end? Don't know. But it's sad. Very, very sad.
If you go and look at the London situation, if you look at the Manchester situation, and even if you look at the New York situation, the same pattern emerges, that acculturation, that is, involvement by the alien, foreign, immigrant community in the mainstream society eventually leads to, in our case, Anglicisation, becoming more English, or Americanization, becoming more American, and it leads to a dilution of traditional Jewish ways of being.
I want to say one thing about integration. Before there was the mainstream and us, you could say there was a mainstream, it was Christian, it was white, it was nominally Protestant, that was mainstream. If you go into schools today, what's the mainstream? What are you going to assimilate with? You're going to become a Jamaican? You're going to be someone from one of the islands like St. Kitts or Trinidad? Are you going to assimilate to someone who says, I'm an Azaturk? Are you going to assimilate with someone who's Pakistani, someone who's a Sikh, someone who's a Hindu? It's interesting, because who are the others now? The others before, there was them and us. We knew who we were, and they knew who they were. But them now is not a homogenous group.
I think there's too much of an emphasis on how big we are, as opposed to what's going on in the community. In other words, if we are a viable number, let's take the conservative estimate, which I do not agree with, but let's say we've got 6,000 Jews. Well, that's still a very large community. You know, if you have a community of active synagogues and a youth club and, the Margin Arnoldsif Community Centre, if you look at the infrastructure that Leeds has got, I defy you to find another provincial community apart from Manchester. So even if we're only 6,000, that's not a small community. Now, I've been in communities of 300 families. That's a small community. Small communities do not have your choice of synagogues. Small communities do not have a thriving youth club, a Maccabi football team. That's not the way it works. But I think sometimes there's a sense of comparing with the past. We used to be so big in the past, and therefore by comparison, we're weak.
But the big question for me is, are people still going to come to Leeds? And if they are, where are they going to come from? They're going to come from Glasgow, from Liverpool. Because lots of the smaller communities, Sunderland, Newcastle, all those places where Jews used to come, Grimsby, have disappeared. As Leeds Jews left, others moved in from other places in the UK. So the question now is, what's the future?
Well, the future? Well, I won't be here to tell the tale.
It's always hard to find succession. It's always hard to find the next group who are going to be as good as the last group. And I look around, and the generation before me, so my father and his peer group, the Leslie Silvers of this world, they seemed better than I am, better than some of my peer group. But we'll try our best. We'll try our best, and we need the next generation to try their best.
We must be doing something right as a community. We're here, we've stood tests of time, we've gone through dips and we've gone through peaks, troughs, but we're here, we're growing, we are active, we're passionate, we're vibrant, and we're very now.
You've got 150 years of a success story where Jews have come from Eastern Europe speaking Yiddish and not English and having nothing. And today they're integrated, they have played a part in the making of Britain, they have played a part in so many different areas of life that we can only, I think, admire this story and hold it up as a great example of how immigrants can change a country and be changed themselves.